We're filming today in San Diego for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive, and I'm really thrilled today to have as our guests Jeannie and Jimmy Cheatham, masters of the blues and educators. And I want to tell you something that happened to me on the way out here. Before I got on the plane in Syracuse, I was listening to some of your records. So all the way on the plane, all 7 hours, I had this "Baby, meet me with your black drawers on." I mean, that was in my head. That's all the way out here.
Has a way of doing that to you.
And, you know, that's a mark of a great tune.
It is.
If it sticks with you like that.
Yeah, you're right.
That's it.
How'd you guys come up with that?
It's
particular-
whistleable.
Yeah, it's whistleable.
It just sort of came out. You know, we were working on that first album,
Yeah.
and we just fooling around.
Yeah.
And when we went in the studio, we cut it. It was after the session was
After the
over.
session was over.
Then we just went into it. There was no arrangement or anything.
No,
And
it's
so
head.
we never dreamed they would ever put it on the record.
Strictly ahead.
We did it for fun.
Yeah.
And
you know,
so we thought it would be against the law or something.
Yeah.
But they put it on the record.
Yeah, we thought they'd ban it.
Right, right. No, it's
But
great.
it went through, we were so surprised.
Yeah,
you know.
really shocked that they kept
know.
it. You know.
I really like the end, too. Remember what you said at the end?
That's Snooki.
Oh, that's Snooki.
That's Snooki?
Yeah, so yeah,
He
that's
said-
Snooki. So
Snooki blamed Jimmy for a
but he
long
blamed
time.
me.
Because
see,
he
all
didn't
the
want his
time.
wife to know that
He didn't
had
want his
said
wife
that.
to know that
Yeah.
he said that. See?
Okay.
You know, so we had to cool it for a while. Then all of a sudden, you know, he got to liking it. You know,
Yeah.
so the next session, he became the director again in terms of
Of the
dealing
Glee
with-
Club.
with the Glee Club. See,
Yeah, he's the
And
official
then-
director.
Yeah, official director. You know.
Well, for some of our maybe students that will watch this later on, you said, you know, that was a head arrangement.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Could you just, in your own words, explain about the head arrangement? Because that's a bit of a lost art these days.
Oh yeah, well, one of the main reasons is too due to the times, you know, because coming up in our era and all the, you know, the perennial giants who've set the pace for everything, you know, they did a lot of head playing, and specifically noted for that was the Kansas City style. See, that's why we, you know, refer to the Kansas City style. In other words, riffs, tunes, and you make up a tune, and you take it until you decide to, you know,
To stop.
to stop. You know, it could be all night. Yeah, really, depending upon the groove, you know, and everything. And so, in other words, it's just coming. In other words, immediately, it's improvisation right from spontaneous improvisation right from the get-go. You know, from the head, and everybody's, you know, just tuning into each other. You know, while one's playing the, you know, playing the lead, or they set up a tune. They listen to it, and that would come back and make a little background to it, something like that. Or they'll pick up the tune as a total unison thing, make it a big mass unison, and then go into solos and then riffs and things like that.
And then it might get written down
Later.
after
Oh yeah,
that.
later, you know.
Especially if they like it.
Especially, yeah, especially if
I
they
think
like
I think also that it's basically taken from like gospel and spiritual music, you know, because you always have a lead singer and or the preacher.
it. Yeah,
He's doing his thing, and everybody's saying "Amen."
yeah.
And then the preacher goes
Commentary,
from one to the third to the fifth
Yeah.
to the seventh,
And
and when he hits the
that's how-
seventh, he's ready to
Yeah,
take everybody out.
That's how you get this going.
Yeah,
you know.
because I've noted that
Yeah.
even when I was little.
Yeah.
And so whoever's playing the solo is the preacher for the moment.
Yeah.
And everybody else is doing the amen
That's right.
stuff.
Yeah.
And then the next soloist takes over. He's the preacher for the moment, and then
Yeah,
everybody
that's
else
right.
is the amen.
Yeah.
So it's really that
And-
simple.
Really.
But you got to live it.
He'd follow, and the solos would follow that, would actually follow that format in terms, like she was saying, tonic, third, fifth, seventh. That's why each course
Sort of grows.
grows.
In
In other words, you
intensity.
become aware of building.
Building,
see?
you know.
Like creativity, well, like the you know, law of creativity dictates that.
Right.
You know, in
And
terms
when
of the energy, energizing.
And when you got up to that seventh, that kind of just had to resolve eventually.
Oh, eventually.
Eventually. Sometimes you just leave it hanging, you see. So that's why you start having a dominant chord endings.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
come back next week and we'll figure we'll
Yeah,
end
leave
it.
them hanging, you know.
Well,
Yeah.
well, how you guys met on stage in the 50s? Now, I read this. I want to know if it's true.
It's pretty much true.
Yeah.
Very much,
Yeah.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, and it was like a quick. She got a quick call. I found out later. I had no idea she would be there, and vice versa.
From
And I
the
got a
president of the union
in Buffalo.
in Buffalo. Because we had come in from Toronto with
Yeah.
our group to do the jam sessions
Yeah.
that went on all night long. What
the Musicians
Sunday,
Club
at the Musicians
upstairs,
Club.
see.
See. And so the press says, Jeannie, they need a piano player in the, what was that, the Elks? Or somewhere.
That was at yeah.
I think it was the Elks.
Yeah, it was the Elks up on
Upstairs,
the
yeah.
up on
An
the
Elks Club?
Up on
He
the-
said, would you
yeah,
go? Yeah, would
yeah,
you go and play over
yeah,
there? He said,
William and
piano player.
Walnut.
Yeah, William and Walnut.
Walnut.
And I said,
311.
this is my day off. I don't want to play the Elks.
Yeah.
And he said, please. He said, just do me a favor.
Yeah.
And so when I came in there was all these guys and then really older guys, you know.
Yeah.
And so I knew they were going to play Honeysuckle Rose.
Yeah,
and
you know the standards. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Take the A train or whatever. So I said, well, that'd be an easy gig.
Yeah.
And then Jimmy came in. And he was a younger guy.
I'm the second youngest, like
yeah,
I heard.
next to me, right.
Yeah.
And so I said, whoa, wait a minute. So, you know, all the musicians always put $1 in a pile and we always get a bottle, so we don't have to buy whiskey at the
Yeah,
bar.
you catch, pitch in.
And so that way, after the gig, we kind of sit around and tell
Socialize.
tales, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I put my $1 in. And after the gig, I looked around, I was going to talk to this guy. He had gone. He cut out. I didn't see him for 3 more years.
That's right.
Really?
That was almost the end right there, huh?
Well, almost.
Almost,
Jeez.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I had just come back from California,
Uh-huh.
not too long from that point, And so that was kind of a habitual thing after the gig is over to pack up and,
Oh,
as they say, as Papa Joe Jones would say, with our mutual army experience, move out smartly.
Yeah. But I would always hang around because I like the stories.
Yeah.
yeah.
See, because he had more of an advantage that he had a chance to grow up with listening to people and talking to people like Joe Jones and Ben Webster
Lester Young.
and Lester Young and all these people because they were in that service with him.
Yeah, Chico Hamilton.
And
I
Chico
slept on the
Hamilton.
top bunk, and Chico slept on the
Oh.
bottom.
You see, and I hadn't had that experience at all because I stayed mostly up in Canada and in the middle part of the country where we played most. So I didn't have a
Okay.
chance to meet any of the big guys like
Right.
that.
But you played a lot for those big singers, all the top singers.
I know, but
Yeah.
that was later.
Let me ask you about that in a moment. I wanted to ask you, at that time when you had first met, was there still a black musicians and a white
Yep.
musicians
Yeah.
union?
Yep, yep.
Yep.
You see, but I was part of the integration in Hollywood. See, because I had finished school at Westlake College of Music in Hollywood for film scoring and
Mhm.
radio and TV and all that. After I had finished the New York Conservatory of Modern Music in Brooklyn, you see.
Mhm.
And it was in that particular sojourn, going to Hollywood for that, is where I also challenged the Local 47, white local, why they refused my card. I said, well, why can't I, as a transfer person, transfer and also become a member and do time according to the rules and regulations. And they said, well, no, we can't accept you, And so anyway, long story short, I had the Dr. Leonard, who was the director of the school. I went back and told him because the school's right there in Vine and Yukon in Hollywood, see. And so my whole reason was, look, I'm here in Hollywood every day. And so Local 767, which is the black local, was way over on the east side, you see, on Central Avenue, And so anyway, Dr. Leonard set up an appointment, and we discussed it and everything. So we went through a whole lot of politics and everything. So anyway, the only satisfaction was that I brought him to admit that the only reason why they wouldn't accept me was due to a gentleman's agreement.
You've heard
I
those
knew
things,
they
right?
understood that because I got that in high school and grade school.
Yeah.
See, so I know how to relate to them when it came to that. See, and so I said, well, okay, I'll be back. And so before I left, sure enough, they had a caucus and got together and the unions emerged, and the same people were in office, because they stay in office pretty long
Yeah.
time until they die,
Yeah.
And so when they came over to 767 to make the graces and everything about the unions coming together, being amalgamated. See, that's,
Uh-huh.
that was the word was used, amalgamation.
Oh,
Not integration or anything like that, amalgamation.
That's a thought.
That was the word.
I see.
And, well, that was due to the ACLU.
I see. Yeah.
It was a powerful move, believe me.
And that year was,
This is like 1950, late 50s, like middle 53. Actually, it was going on as say from 51, 52, then 53 when that finally happened. When it finally happened, like in 53,
okay.
late 53, early 54.
Did you both know you were going to be musicians at a young age?
Yes, I did.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you first.
I did. I knew that. I wanted to be an artist, but I started taking lessons very early, 5, 6 years old, from a very good teacher from England. His name was Arthur Reginald Riley. And he was a very good teacher, and I learned to play classical music and read everything, and plus I was playing in church, you see. So it was a very, it didn't seem unnatural for me. I knew that that was my life work, you know, at a very early age.
Mhm.
It was either that or be a school teacher, and I knew I didn't want to do this.
I think we're glad that you went the music route.
Yeah,
Right.
I am.
I don't want to
Definitely.
do that. Nothing wrong with being a school
Oh,
teacher.
it's an honorable profession.
Yeah.
You know,
That's
but
right.
it's
It's got to be honorable.
hard.
They don't pay.
Yeah.
So you might as well be what you love doing, be a
Right.
jazz
Dedicated.
musician, starved to death too.
that's right. There's some similarities there, aren't
Oh, yeah.
there? Yeah.
Like a vow of poverty.
That's it. Yeah.
How about yourself? Was trombone your first instrument?
Actually, baritone horn was my first instrument in terms of performing on it because my arm wasn't long enough to reach to reach all the way out to seventh position on the trombone, slide trombone, you know. So so the music instructor, you know, kind of smiled and says, well, he said, look, he says, see, you know, you got to grow a little more. And because in order to really deal with the horn, he says, so if you don't mind me making a suggestion, how about playing a baritone horn? You know, I said, okay, you know, I wanted to get started, you see. And so I stayed with the baritone horn for like the first year.
Yeah.
And this is in grade school. And then the following year, which was like 7th grade, I started sixth grade. Then I stayed with the baritone in 7th, and then in 8th grade, I went to the trombone, you see, and you know, made the orchestra and all that. But my first involvement in music performance is voice.
Oh.
I sang, you know, I was also appointed as one of the members of the 100 voice choir, a city boy choir in the city, all city, you know. And so I sang in the choir and also solo. So that got me, you know, as performing personally,
Right.
you know.
And you learned to read music at that age, and
Oh, yeah.
Oh
The
yeah,
whole thing.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That shows you the difference in
Yeah.
the school system
Oh,
and also the city system, because we had the same thing.
yeah,
Everybody took music.
yeah.
And
was required.
it was a requirement. And they used to have like spring festivals and
That's
things
right.
where you
Right.
your group from this school would go against this one,
Yeah.
and you find the all Ohio singers, and they come
that's how
together,
they
pick the
find
best out of
yeah,
everyone,
out
just
of
like
everyone.
you do.
That's how it
sports.
happened. Yeah,
uh-huh.
Just like sports.
yeah.
And they made festivals, and geez, I played vocal choir, orchestra.
Yeah,
They were doing musicals.
yeah. That's right. I
Yeah,
did
and
the
so
same
we
thing.
had to play for those people,
Yeah.
and they put on a show every year.
That's right.
And this is all grade school, mind you, and we still taking math and everything else that we supposed to take.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
But it was equally required.
It was just required, just like sports.
And right into high school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because I played in the jazz band in high school,
right.
the orchestra, and also the marching
The
band.
marching band.
You know, and the marching band was was the same as a pep band. Today they have pep band and marching band, but at that time the marching band solely did both jobs because after the first year, in terms of my sophomore year, actually went into playing football, you see. But I was still playing in the orchestra, but I couldn't play in a march band because it was like trying to be in two places at one time.
Well, that would have been a good one. I would
Yeah,
have,
you know. But
I would wanna
anyway,
see you flying over the stadium.
but it was just, and you know, it was so beautiful. The instructors were fantastic. I mean, they had depth, breadth, and height.
Yes.
I know you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
As a human being trained to transmit knowledge.
Yes, so much
And
more than just the
perform.
music, right? That-
Oh, yeah.
That's what I
It was
mean.
like a
Yeah.
life thing,
Yeah.
a life thing.
Oh,
too.
Yeah.
and that's where I became,
Yeah.
and you know, it struck a chord here,
Yeah.
you know, and that's it. I knew what I wanted to do, you know,
Yeah.
which actually it was an affirmation really, and a confirmation because at home before even getting into school, when when I was like 4 and 5 years old, you know, 2 and a half, say 3, after I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, but I came there when I was about 3 years old, 2 and a half to 3 years. But anyway, my uncle in Buffalo, New York, had all the records. And the word, I didn't know it then, but he was looking it back. He was a very eclectic, he had a very eclectic ear. He had from country, spirituals, to opera, Lawrence Tibbett, you know, and I was trying to, I always recall her name, but Lily Pons. I'll never forget that. Lily Pons. You know, that's going back,
Yeah.
you know, and also naturally Caruso.
You never thought you'd say that, did you?
No, because I'm watching his eyes. you know, and naturally Caruso. You see,
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, and just name it. You know, I heard all this. You know, and then we had the piano at the house, and I,
Everybody had a piano.
yeah,
Everybody
at
had a
that
piano.
time. You know, just like in the
Everybody had a
South, everybody
piano.
had an organ way back earlier. You know what I mean? Had a little pump organ. You know.
We all have- and now they're just beginning to gather data about what it does to a child's spatial knowledge by, it has to do with music.
Yes.
That's right.
And I'm certainly glad I'm not going out of here without them knowing that, because
That's
we've been
right.
saying it for years,
Yeah,
Right.
you know,
we lived
and
it.
so we've lived it. So.
You know, and our instructors, that's why you heard me say, and I know you haven't heard that, 3 dimensions, depth,
No.
breadth, and height, you know.
Right.
But you deal with the pyramid then.
Right.
You know.
We hope it.
But
We hope they.
That's so true with the education, and sometimes I see kids who have a really hard time even clapping or moving to a beat. And I'm going, why is that? I want to know why that is. And I suspect because they don't have music in the house.
That-
It's just,
exactly.
oh, yeah.
it
Exactly.
doesn't sink in.
Right.
Because there is, you know, it's like we're more mass conscious, I would say now, as of now, becoming much more aware of being aware of the power of music. Because what it can do subliminally, without any overt influences, is
It's
amazing.
remarkable,
They haven't
it
even
is.
gotten to that yet.
Well, then, do you feel that the negative influence is also possible? I mean, there's a kind of controversy about a lot of the music that's out today, whether it be rap or whether it be heavy metal. You know, some of the things that they're saying, if music can be a positive influence, can it also go the other way?
I don't really know. All I know is that some of the studies that I've been following find that the more simpler the music is, the more the child learns, even in utero.
Yeah,
Like regular, just plain little chords, 1, 3, 5 chords,
yeah.
maybe a 7th, you know.
Yeah.
And later.
Yeah.
And the simpler the music is,
Yeah.
it seems to widen their spatial sense.
Yeah.
And then they also find that vocal music
Very,
also, but it has to be a certain type.
Type.
Simple again,
yeah.
you see. So I have a feeling that they're going to find that each one of those chords
Have.
have a power and really correspond to part of the person's brain
Yeah.
and body.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking that pretty soon they can measure this stuff now. I know they can.
Yeah, in terms of brain waves.
See, I know they
See,
can.
the
And
activity.
And I'm quite
Outstanding.
sure that the powers that be that keep saying that we don't need music in the schools and
That's the negative part.
because that's more negative than rap.
Bec-
And I
Be-
like rap on certain things because they have a lot of people that teach very interesting things through rap, and
That's
and the
right.
rhythm of the words
There you go.
is a power in itself. It's almost like haiku poetry if you want
That's
to
right.
talk about it, because that's a sense, an art form in itself. One day we're gonna probably all peel away all the birds, the birds and
Yeah.
things, and say, "Oh, this is really poetry. This is wonderful poetry."
You know, another interesting thing, not to oversimplify, but to me, it's like getting right into the source, like looking into the sun, but not too long because you become blind as a
You
bat.
get blind.
But the thing is that we look at sound. Sound does not happen unless it has a vibrating body, some way, shape, form, or fashion. But sound itself, the nature of sound, is emanated from a vibration. There is nothing that exists on this planet Earth or in its environment of the universe that doesn't have, is not affected by vibration. Sun rays. How many miles? They say how many million miles is supposed to be? 93 million or something like that. But nobody got it that close enough to find out if
Well,
it's
no,
90.
not for
But the
sure.
point is, by even projecting that, you know that you feel the vibration of that heat.
Uh-huh.
You follow me?
Yeah.
And so that has to have, without a doubt, whatever, knowingly or unknowingly, some aspect of effect from a scientific point of view on every living thing on this planet.
Man. I'm
Well,
gonna have
look-
to sit and analyze that.
Well, sure. But Count Basie's music, and
Yeah.
for some reason,
Yeah.
a lot of the people that call themselves connoisseurs or want to write all about music,
Yeah.
for some reason they sort of leave him
Yeah.
over here,
Yeah.
and they're always talking about somebody else over here. But he knew exactly how to maintain order. When he played his music, it corresponded to the heartbeat,
Yeah, that's it.
and he knew that.
He was born to do it.
He's born to do that. He's
Yeah.
one of the best
At
per-
it.
at that. If you
Yeah.
want to speak of something that he
know.
contributed,
Yeah.
he really knew how to move and make a crowd
That's right.
feel wonderful because he put that music right there where it
That's
belongs,
right.
in the heartbeat, you know.
And the most beautiful thing, here he is, let's say 13, 14, 15, now 17 piece band, 5, 5, 5, et cetera, whatever, you know. At that time it was smaller, you know.
Right.
When he say, bing, look out.
He play one note and it just
And the
said
band
everything.
say,
What power that
It's
was. huh?
amazing.
That was
It's
amazing.
amazing.
And
It's
that's
something.
what-
Now that's something to study.
that's what I relate to my students. Just
Yeah.
last night I had my, rehearsal on Tuesday and Wednesday nights.
Uh-huh.
And every time we go through things, we're dealing with the chart, and I make them aware of that. And I say it over and over, many different ways, and some about, I said, believe me, music is powerful. I don't say jazz is powerful. I say music is powerful. Whatever its form or style is, and wherever it's coming from on this planet or anywhere else, in terms of you want to deal with music as a sphere, as far as that's concerned. But the thing is, we haven't begun to even. We're just scratching the surface.
And when they say harmony, we mean, we used to have a sort of like a arrangers band in Buffalo, New York,
Yeah.
where people could bring in different
Yeah.
arrangements and we rehearse.
Yeah.
And then we put on a big show,
Then we put on showcase,
a
jazz
showcase once a month, you know. And we had this one guy, he would come in with this arrangement. And he would pass out the music, and everybody feeling great.
Yeah.
And he'd bring his hand down, and the band would fight, start this big fight.
Boy, they
Believe
hit
me,
that first
that
note,
first-
the chord,
first
you know,
chord,
and all of a sudden
Everything would
everybody
go.
got.
Everybody started yelling, punching, and then head for the bar and double Guggenheimer.
Yeah,
Give
you
me
know,
that
the
kid.
Guggenheimer whiskey, that was a special there at the club, you know.
Jimmy and I watched this thing. I said,
Consistent.
It was consistent. I said, I don't care what he writes. Every time he writes something, you start rehearsing, everybody starts fighting.
Yeah, you know.
He has
And-
so much cacophony
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so many notes.
Yeah. See, and that is, see that gnarling vibration, see, automatically is going to make your nerve system,
Yeah,
you know,
whoa.
catch
You know.
a good hold of that, you know. And he'd be sitting back like this.
Watching the effect.
Oh, he
watching-
liked it.
He was
huh?
So he
very
was
aware.
aware
He was
of what he
aware.
was doing. So that's, and when you spoke earlier, we could go around the track, when you spoke about the negative aspect.
And now there.
You see.
There you
Yeah, oh, yes, yes. And, you know, just like in anything else, you know, just like, you know, the church, you know, you
Yeah.
got the minister, you know, you
Yeah.
can be positive or you can be very negative, you know,
Yeah.
in terms of a sense of power, you know, and controlling from that point of view and that type of stuff, you know. So it's always AC/DC, just like in terms of dealing with electricity, you got to have a little negative, a little positive
Yeah.
power in order to have good, good,
Boy,
good
oh
flow of
boy.
electricity. You see.
Well, that's what I mean, among the things I love about the blues is that you can play the quote wrong notes, the blue notes,
Yeah.
that clash theoretically,
Yeah.
but that they still sound, you know,
Because
so
they're
good.
bent.
Because
Yeah.
they're bent.
They're always
Yeah.
bent.
You see, and
They never go straight on.
And the other reason is because of dealing with the system in terms of the Western world, we scientifically divided everything up. Nothing wrong with that. But to make that the total aspect of what music is about is where the negative aspect of conveying that message, you see. You know, when it came to opera, Italy was it, you know. They didn't know anything about China. You know, and anything sounded strange, they would say it was Chinese music.
Yeah,
I don't care what
But
it
they're
was.
in deep trouble now,
yeah.
you see.
Yeah.
Globally, they're in deep trouble, you see. All of a sudden, they're finding out there's some other people living elsewhere,
Right.
you see. And they have their respective cultures according to the creative process that we live in.
Pentatonic scale, for instance.
Yeah,
Right.
you see.
And how does that fit in? How are we going to resolve that with our own 8-note scale?
Yeah,
Well, the whole thing is we're coming to grips with that because, again, like we speak in terms of harmony, at least from my point of view, I like to look at the aspect of creation. You're dealing with such a fine sense. I say real vibration, balance. And so we can go to China, say, or Japan, yin yang, or wherever it is, they got a word for balance, you see. And music speaks strongly to the nature of what we all are about in terms of the creative process. And we have a choice how we wish to use it in terms of our given talents.
Well said. Wow. Let me ask you about some things from years past. You had some big band experience along the way with some of our more notable big band
Yeah,
leaders.
Very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you had to pick a time that was one of your favorites in one of those bands, what might it be?
Well, I can't say favorites. Each one, in terms of the experience, what it offered me was that same, can I say, aspect of being uplifted and
Nothing like a big band.
and maintaining an open mind. You see, now sure I could talk about being on the road and the negative hassles and etc. But the amazing thing about it all, because you're still sleeping and whatnot, you know, with eating with the individuals, when you got on that bandstand.
Nothing like it. It's worth everything.
Everything became one,
It's worth
you know, and all this diverse expression coming out of these horns, and then from one section to the next, speaking to each other. Then in terms of mass unisons and you know whatever, and solos, personal expression, and that whole band, just like when you hear a bassy, it speaks.
Yeah. And it was different with when he was with Duke
Duke Ellington
and Maynard
Maynard
Ferguson band. I
Ferguson.
really liked
Ma-
hanging around with that group
yeah,
of guys. They were really.
it was a lot of fun.
Was
yeah.
that the small big band with Maynard, or was it a whole?
No, it was actually it was a big band. You see, it was a time that he and the what's his name, the that was traveling with him that was on the,
You talking about the piano player?
no, they drove on the road together. Oh, you know, they took, he and Maynard would take this chemical or whatever it was. They stay out of their minds, you know. But the thing is that I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah,
but
well,
it's-
probably better not.
but what I was saying, the
I
important
know.
thing is that, I mean, this was a highly intellectual man. This was
Yeah.
no, you know, peddler or anything like that. I mean, he's highly respected as a human being, you know.
You
But
think of it.
that was during the time they were traveling on the road together. Willie Maiden
Oh, Willie,
was the
yeah.
straw boss.
Uh-huh.
That's how I got in the band, because Willie Maiden and I, excuse me, finished Westside College of Music together in Hollywood, you see. And he called me up. They were on their way. And in fact, they'd come to Buffalo to play a gig, and he had found out that I was in Buffalo. The trombone player had to go bury his dad in Texas. And so he called me up and said, "Hey, man, I'd like for you to, you know, come on over to this club we're playing and make this gig with us, because we don't want to show up short a man, because our contract could be voided."
Yeah,
You know?
then they
You
don't
know?
want to pay you.
And so at that time, we had our jazz showcase going. I was doing a lot of writing and stuff like that. I said, Willie, it's good talking with you. I said, well, I hadn't been playing too much, you know, really, in comparison. We were doing a lot of writing and stuff then.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Look, Jim," he says, "I know about you." He says, "Please do me that favor, you know." And I talked with Jenny. She said, "Hey, you know, go ahead and make it." And so I made it, you know. And so I went out to that club that night and walked in, and we sat down. And I had met Maynard before in Hollywood, see. And so when we got ready to hit, I said, "Well, here it goes. Where it stopped, nobody knows,
Yeah.
but I'm going to give it the best shot."
Yeah,
And everybody's falling out laughing.
He had some great young trumpet players.
And yeah.
He had some
yeah.
hard arrangements, too.
Oh,
yes.
Yeah, he had this lead trumpet player and who's also fine educator too,
Mm-hmm.
and he was just a wonderful singer.
And Speedy Jones- Speedy was on
and
the-
Speedy Jones
was on the drums.
playing the drums, and Jackie Byers
Jackie
playing
Byers
piano.
playing piano. A tough band. It was a
You
good
know,
band.
so the rhythm section was, you know,
Yeah,
was
it was
you know,
there.
really good band, you know,
Yeah.
fantastic band, and we had a lot of fun, you know, we had a lot of fun, you know.
I like big bands.
travel.
That's sort of my first experience in jazz.
That's a powerful
Yeah.
experience, you know. I think all the youngsters, you know, if they have an opportunity, if they play in a march band or whatever, have an opportunity to play some big band music, you know, it's on another level. You know, even a good strong march band is a heck of a level too.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a high, you know.
Right.
You know, or a concert band is a heck of a high. But then you get into a jazz band, it's like, whew.
There's another level there.
Another level, you know, and they all have their levels. That's why I said to try to say which is my favorite. It's very difficult for me
Right.
because they were all very for me anyway, very positive. I accept everything that went with it because that's what made it positive. You see, it's
And that's the
like-
only way you can hang out.
It's the only
And
way.
To be a musician, you have to be, I think, super flexible. Because otherwise, how could you make it at all?
Yeah.
See, and you know,
How could you?
and also that coincides with, even though they coined that phrase jazz and, you know, refer to improvisation, you know, the act of improving on something, right? Improvisation, that's what it is. That's what I explain to my kids, you see. I said, everybody does that on this planet. Because nobody knows everything. So living life is a total improvisational experience. And those who try to fix it so it's like 1, 2, 3 are, you know,
Yeah.
eventually find out it doesn't work 1, 2, 3 all the time, you see. You know, they got to deal with the law of permutation.
Do you find that some of your students have more success simply because of their personalities, that they're more easygoing or willing to take chances?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because that's that freedom you speak about in terms of personal expression, again, you see.
You have to be fearless.
Yes, yes,
And that comes from having confidence.
really, you know.
And I think I don't think you could teach anybody that. I think a lot of their early life experiences with their folks and maybe even before they're born,
The only,
I think has a heck of a
yeah,
lot
it's true.
to really deal with that. Because most real fearful people, they can accomplish a lot in another direction, but I don't think they can be a musician, not a jazz musician, and
No,
be
no,
that fearful.
No, mm,
It has something also to do with faith.
that's it,
You know, like someplace somewhere somebody need a good band,
yeah,
because you just have to feel like tomorrow's gonna be okay.
yeah.
And then there comes the other side, like you go up that mountain, and you go along, you're on the road, and you think you're next to the gigs and whatever. Then you get to a point in everybody's life where you start feeling, I don't know if I can do that. And a lot of it has to do with the physical body, if they're taking care of it, or
Yeah.
all of a sudden they get a little twinge here or there, and they start losing that faith. And that's when you see them putting the horns in the bed, behind the bed, or in the closet, and try to find something else to do. Now, I tell you, in my experience, I found that to be a crucible for every musician. I don't care whether he's classical or gospel or jazz musician. There comes a time when you have to decide whether you're going to really continue. And that, to a musician, they always say musicians have to play, like to play. Say jazz musicians have to play. They always say that. Every musician comes to that point in his life where he has to decide whether he's going to continue. And Jimmy and I have been around here long enough to know when they're really struggling with that, because it doesn't happen overnight. It happens over a period I found of about 7 years. On again, off again, off on again. Toward the end of that 7 years, it seems to be more off than on, but they seem to resign themselves. It takes about 7 years for them to resign themselves to the fact that they're no longer going to either keep up with what's going on, or want to stay on the road, or want to put up with his diminishing physical.
Yeah.
And that is it's a sad thing. We've seen it all up and down the
Yeah, it's
road
like,
in different places.
really, in a sense, well, it's not equal to, but in a sense, it's like dealing with thoroughbred horse.
Yes.
I'm pardon.
A thoroughbred
horse, you know.
horse,
You know?
that's
He's
geared,
used to running
you know.
that race, you know.
Yeah, and that's what it lives for.
You know.
You see.
And then pretty soon it can't. And
Yeah.
and I don't know. I guess it's just like boxers or anything else. There comes a time.
Athletic.
But I think we need more. What can I say? I think we need more places for people like us to talk, to go and talk this thing before it happens,
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
so that at least the preparation won't be so terrible. I don't know what you would call it, but I think we need a place where musicians can go and talk about that.
Yeah.
They need some support in dealing
Support,
with.
some
Yeah.
kind of support system in the musical, among musicians,
Mhm.
so that they can say, well, I can call, not a Reverend Genzel, because he just passed, but I mean a group of people that have been there, that have decided what they've decided, how they managed that, how did they come away from it with grace, and
That's the
how
main
and how to
thing.
maintain your personage.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I find the saddest thing that I've seen in as long as I've been playing, 40 years I've been playing. And that's the saddest thing, when you see them quit. They, oh, I'm not playing
Yes.
anymore, and blah. And
Yeah, it
it's a real, but they need support. And I think we
That's
should
the
really
thing.
have a place or some organization or something where a guy can go, or a woman, and when they decide to stop their life work.
Do you think it sometimes comes from knowing how to deal with perhaps their diminishing physical skill at what they do? Like, let's say a trumpet player has made his mark as a high note
Hey,
man, right?
yes.
And it gets to the point where they can't quite get
Hey.
up to where they used to.
Hey.
That's right.
And unless they can figure out, well, I can't quite do that, but I can do.
Yes, that's where the,
That's where the decision comes in.
that's where this decision
Uh,
comes. See, and
it's-
most guys don't make it.
Yeah, you see, because in a sense, in terms of dealing with the attitude of achieving,
See?
it's like they don't seem to have arrived at the attitude of dealing with the art of field expedience. You know what I mean when I say that? I learned that from service. In other words, you're out in the wilderness, you see. You don't know anything about the wilderness. But at the same time, you go through all your agony, et cetera, and pretty soon, bang, that creative energy coming from all that environment plus yourself tells you what you do because you start to listen. And you listen and you act on it, you see. So it's the same thing, in a sense, when you're playing. If you don't listen what you're playing, if you don't hear what you're playing, then you're a trained robot. You know, technically, mechanically, like mass production, ding, 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 ding. But there's no spirit involved in terms of equating to soul expression, feeling.
You'll have to
It's all
find a-
intellectual.
Yeah, they have to
So,
find a spot for themselves once
the
they
whole-
break down.
Yeah,
like
because
that.
being around a lot of, the lead players, and at the same time, the solos, like you take Maynard Ferguson. Now, lead player, solo, and everything, chops of iron. I mean, but
He was
the
born
thing
with
is,
that.
He's born with
He
it.
born
I
with
saw
that.
Maynard at 13 years old. His mother and father scored him to Crystal Beach, with his bat. You see?
Yes.
You follow me?
Yeah.
He had it. You see. But everybody else who finally heard him assumed whatever they wanted to assume of how he got that way.
He was born
I said he
that
was
way.
born to do what he do, and like when I got in the band, they had,
He ruined many a kid, man.
Yeah, he had 5 trumpets in the
And they're
band.
trying to beat Maynard.
Oh.
And they're trying to
They're trying to beat
now,
every night.
out high. That's the point.
See?
You see, they're not out jazzing.
No.
They're trying to. See, that's where all the high stuff comes
Yeah.
in. You see, they're trying to out high him, and the lead player, is trying to warn them because
said, "Look,
they're
take-
youngsters,
be cool now."
Oh, they're arrogant and everything. They didn't want to hear it.
You don't know what you're talking about, old man.
See, man is still moving around playing, no matter how, somebody want to criticize him. Well, he doesn't have the chops he used to.
Oh.
Well, heck, the person that's talking don't have what they had to.
Yeah, right.
That's why the tune was written. Things ain't what they used to be. That's the main reason why it's written. Believe me. You see, so that's where that whole thing, kind of comes in terms of dealing with the attitude about the whole thing. Because if that was the goal, the top goal, just to be a high note player, well then, eventually, you run out of. You don't even have too much of dealing with the law of permutation. In other words, to make do with what you got. That's why I get back to field expedience.
Yeah.
In other words, you find out in nature, you make do with what you got. All of a sudden, you get sensitized, and you know which is poison, which isn't, in terms, because you got to eat.
You
And how do you survive? Well, I ate bugs, I ate this bug, and I ate that bug. Then I ate this one, made me sick, so I know not to mess with that again, because, and if I recognize that, it means I'm still living. So that's what I'm after. I'm still, you follow me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, they did. They have this big apartment building in New York City, for musicians that retired and stuff.
Yeah.
And Dizzy Gillespie, I think, has this hospital set up where you could go and get treatments and things.
Yeah,
If I'm
yeah,
in New
he-
Jersey somewhere.
Help to stop, yeah.
But that's sort of like
One of-
what I'm speaking
He's
of in
one
a
of the
sense,
first.
because that we speak a different language,
Yeah,
and so when we get that put out the pasture,
yeah.
we should be around people that's
Because
done
you have
what we've
nobody to
done.
talk to.
There's nobody to talk to.
Because like she said, one of the saddest things, like when we're, like Papa Joe's like
Yeah.
my mentor, you see, and everything. I mean, he raised me professionally and everything. And he, wherever we went after we left New York, I was called to Bennington to teach, and then Wisconsin, and finally L.A. But the thing is that he would show up at my first concert, wherever I held it, and nobody would tell him.
Nobody has. No, he'd be sitting in the backstage there on the chair.
Yeah.
With
Yeah,
his handkerchief.
I'd come in, and he'd be there.
Yeah.
fantastic, you know. What an inspiration, you know.
Yeah.
You know, and to have that kind of backup, you know.
Really, it makes you feel very special.
And then he got on and as we moved, wherever we come, he knew that, and we tell him, look, Joe, whenever, you know, you feel out of sorts or whatnot, hey, you know, where we are,
you got a home.
you got a home.
And he came and
And
stayed
he
with
came
us many a
and,
time.
and you know, sometimes he stayed 1 week or 2 weeks,
Yeah.
and sometimes a day, bing, and he's gone, or going to another, see some other musicians like up
Yeah.
in like in San Diego, then he go to L.A. You know, that make his rounds.
He told everybody I put him out because I wouldn't let him smoke. in the
Smoke,
house.
yeah, that was the thing.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was a chain smoker.
Yeah, yeah, oh, he's
Yeah. And
yeah,
I
he
told
was
him, I
a
said,
real,
Jones, you're going to have to go out on the patio and smoke. He
Yeah.
said, what?
yeah,
And so he went back to New York. We got calls
Yeah.
all week long.
You threw
yeah,
you threw
all week
Jones
long,
out.
yeah, you put
Papa Joe out? I said, yes, we
And
did.
then when we got to New York and everything, everybody was still talking.
He told everybody I put him out.
Yeah.
But he was smoking too much even for
You know,
because I had a Brownicle thing and I'm
Yeah.
trying to sing too.
Yeah.
And so I was really getting that second
Yeah.
line smoke then, you know.
but it's-
Well, he
but-
certainly was one of the
Ah.
important people in the
Oh,
line of drummers,
yes.
wasn't he?
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes, you know,
Yeah. And George Vivier was another.
George Vivier
sweet
was
person.
another. You see,
And,
yeah.
But in
Beautiful
fact,
souls.
who was it? John Young. John
Yeah.
Young is one of our friends here. He's a musician. Used to play at the Apollo Theater.
Yeah, former saxophone player.
But he's a very good friend of Milt Hinton, and he called us up last week, and he said Milt Hinton called him up and told him, say, John, say, I went to a funeral of one of our friends last week. And John said, yeah. He said, yeah. And he said he's talking to the funeral director, and everybody was getting ready to leave. He said he told the funeral director, gee whiz, he said, I've been out here too much this year. He said 3 or 4 of my friends have been laid to rest in the. So the funeral director asked him, said, well, how old were they? He said, well, one was 70, one was 72, and one was 75. And so he said, the funeral director said, well, how old are you? He said, I'm 89. He said, well, you might as well not go home. You might as well just stay here.
That was cold, wasn't it?
Oh, dear. Don't say that to Milt Hinton.
He said the man told him that. He called up John Young, and John Young called us. I said, oh, please.
He had, you know, and that's the other thing about sharing.
Yeah,
you know,
Sharon, that's his boy.
and that's where, in terms of how we came up,
Yeah, right.
with that whole, it was always family.
Yeah.
Yes.
You always,
Yeah.
find, hey, how do you feeling today? Everything all right?
We made a
And if they weren't together, wherever they were, they could be in Europe. All of a sudden, you know, they get this
thing about family.
in your, you know, why? Let me call Jim and Jen. And they'll call us, say, how y'all doing? Blah, 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 blah. Well, I'll be home, so and so and so and so and so and so. But just thinking about you, so I just want to let you know.
Yeah,
I
we
was
get
thinking
it.
about you.
Yeah.
You know, and that's the way it was, that the whole connection. And that, to me, represents the oasis.
Yeah.
And that's what we need,
Mhm.
is an oasis,
Yeah.
not only for the musicians, but for the whole human race.
Jimmy
to
wanted to make
go-
the whole human.
Well, I mean,
That's the
the
truth.
whole
We
thing
do
is,
need it.
that's all we were all going to get in tune to, to this one sun and one moon. out
Right,
here.
because my mother is a little more pessimistic. She calls us, she listens to everything.
You know?
She calls us up, she says, listen, have you heard that song, The Whole World is a Ghetto, by that group
Yeah, that
called
was-
War?
Yeah, that was pretty wild.
And I said, what? She says, you know, they're right.
Was this recent? Fairly recent?
That's when
yes.
they were.
Yeah, when they had their
that
hit
record,
on it.
had that hit on.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
She listens to everything. She's
Yeah,
89 now.
She's surprising.
Yeah.
Well, you guys sound like you, maybe you are or could become the Milton Mona Hinton of the San Diego area.
Oh, I don't
You
know.
know, I
don't
mean,
know.
there's certain people that you like to be around,
Yeah.
you know, because they give what you guys are talking about.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why the Sweet Baby Blues Band was so special.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
really.
Because Curtis Pegler,
Oh,
Red Callender,
Calmer,
Jimmy Noon,
Jimmy,
and John Harris. Now, John
Harris.
Harris is the only one left
Yeah.
from our old group.
yeah,
You know, he played with Carmen McRae.
yeah.
He played with
Horace Silver.
Horace Silver. You
He
know,
played quite a few.
and he's one of the most sensitive drummers.
Yeah, very sensitive.
Joe Jones was crazy about him.
Yeah.
You know.
And so was Ed.
Ed Thigpen.
Ed Thigpen.
Yeah, and Roy Haynes. He was
And
like-
Roy Haynes
yeah.
loved him, you know,
Yeah.
because both of them came up to the Vine
The
Street
Vine
Grill to
Street.
hear us when we were playing.
Yeah.
And they were just sitting there, you know, checking out John and said, look,
What is he? How's he
meet
doing?
him. I want to meet him. Make
Yeah.
sure you have him
Yeah.
come to my table, you know.
Yeah.
He said, because I don't believe what I'm seeing and hearing simultaneously.
Right.
He said, I haven't seen this in years.
In years.
You know,
But he's
a
so
drummer,
sensitive.
the manner and the way
Yeah.
he accompanies the play
And really,
and express it, and it just, oh,
and he can catch a trumpet player
yeah,
in midair. He can tell whether he's gonna split a note or not.
yeah.
He hits his bass drum, and the note just comes
Pop
out of
out.
the trumpet.
That's what Papa Joe was.
And Papa Joe
Yeah.
is, and
He
I
would hit
don't know,
certain cymbals and
You
do the
see,
same
certain
thing or
cymbals.
whatever, you know.
and,
you
it-
know.
and he walks around in their heads,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You
and
know.
he knows, and
Yeah.
and that's where he's such a valuable accompanist.
Yeah, just
And I can see why
fantastic.
Carmen McRae would love him,
Yeah,
see, because that's who we
fantastic.
work with her too. See. But he's the last one of the old band. In our new band now, we have Ricky Woodard, we have Nolan, Shaheed,
Shaheed.
we have Richard Reed on bass. We call him Rough House.
Rough House.
And we threaten the audience, if you don't behave, we're going to let Richard Reed fall on you.
I take it he's
Because he's
fairly
so
big.
big. He's a big guy. We're going to let him fall on
He comes to the door sideways.
you. Yeah. Yeah.
Comes in the door sideways.
Yeah.
Well, he got his face
He's
too.
big. Yeah, he's a big old
Well,
guy.
that makes him really look more gigantic than he is.
Wow.
And we have Ernie Fields. Now, Ernie Fields plays baritone and also,
Bass clarinet.
Bass
He
clarinet.
plays, yeah, and clarinet.
yeah,
Yeah.
and clarinet. But he and his dad were both put into the Hall of Fame in Oklahoma. First time they ever had a father and son
Oh.
Yeah.
combination in Oklahoma. But
Speaking of father and sons, was the Jimmy Noon that
Yep.
played with you? Was he was
Yeah.
the son
Son
of
of
Yeah.
the Chicago
Jimmy Noon
Jimmy?
out of New Orleans.
that's
New
right.
Orleans?
Oh, in Chicago.
Chicago.
no.
Chicago,
Yeah,
yeah.
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 Because when I first saw that on the record,
Yeah.
I said,
Yeah, he's
wait a
junior.
minute.
One
I
of
had to
those-
go to
one
my
of-
encyclopedia
Yeah.
and check who I was
I
looking
think one of those videos is the last thing that he played on,
Oh.
Yeah,
Jimmy
it
Noon.
is. Is that that's the one we did the club days, right?
That's right. That's
Yeah.
the one that they
And-
put into the Library of Congress.
Yeah, we got inducted into the Library of Congress
Yeah.
with
Great.
that one, and also the Three Generations Blues.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Both of those are inducted. You know.
Yeah.
Well, let me talk about your music for a bit. You have certain piano licks I think you like a lot.
Yes.
But da-da-da-da. I mean, I hear that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's like, as soon as I hear that, I mean, it sets up so much. It sets up the tempo.
It does.
It sets
Oh,
up
yeah.
like a nice groove.
That's
you
true.
know? And
True.
it's a sound that I will
Yeah.
associate with you. And when you come up with, I mean, you seem to have quite a bag of licks. Are these things, when you sit to write an arrangement, are they things that you hear in your head beforehand, or do you need to hear the tune first? And how do you decide exactly what to write behind a certain song? Is that something you can answer?
Well, actually, fundamentally, I'm a firm believer in going into the aspect of the intuitive side for utmost.
Mhm.
You know, as far as the intellectual part, dealing with scientific, the voice and notes and things like that, because even intuitively, I get sounds that I hear, and when I hear it, then I go.
And it depends on who.
and it
who-
depends,
who
you know,
solo.
Who's solo?
See, if we know it's Snooki,
Yeah,
then he knows there's
I know.
a certain thing that
Yeah.
that'll help
Yeah.
support
Yeah.
what Snooki does.
yeah. And
Same with-
writing,
right?
and then writing, like when we do like the group sounds and things like that,
Mhm.
Jeannie's or whatever background that we're playing for Jeannie,
Mhm.
that's certain nuance that
Certain
happens, in terms
Yeah.
of everybody,
Yeah.
so that we, we just get that wonderful, how can I say it, homogeneous
Uh-huh.
That's a good word.
feeling,
Yeah.
and out of it comes the sound.
And sometimes we tease them, Sometimes we make a riff.
Yeah.
It's one of the soloists'
Yeah.
favorite
Now-
thing that they play.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the riff.
Yeah, well,
Then they'll say,
that's with an intent.
we put it in the riff. Then they start to do it. and it's there, and so then they have
Now
to.
they gotta go somewhere
They gotta
else.
go somewhere.
Hey, you know, Ellington used to do that all the time
Always.
too, right?
Yeah.
All the
I like
time.
that thing. I think I'll write a
He,
tune around it.
he was
Yeah.
he was a main thief, boy, when it came to that. Believe me.
Yeah, we do
Because
that real-
You could hear him, you know, when the guy that take the solo, he'd be playing, yeah, then he'd say, and he'd answer him. Then
You say, you know that's gonna be in the next
and you
one.
could tell he really likes it because in and out he'd be playing it
All along.
to make sure that he don't
Don't forget it.
He could have gone broke if he had to pay royalties to all the fellas that he
Oh, we
took licks
know.
from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because Snooky has a certain thing.
Yeah.
Curtis Pegler had his certain thing.
Yeah.
And naturally, Cat Daddy and,
Cat Daddy,
and,
yeah.
and Ricky Woodard, he has this certain
he has
thing
this
that you always know it's Ricky because you hear this thing.
Once you hear it, oh, that's
That's
Rick.
his stick. Everybody has their stamp,
Yeah.
you know, or voice,
Once it's
or
on the
like
stamp.
Sweets,
Like,
you know.
I guess.
ditto,
And Curtis always did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so on the last record,
Oh,
the Good
yeah.
News Blues, we did Mr. CP. That's
Yeah.
why, and we dedicated it.
Dedicated,
Because we
yeah.
took all of his pet phrases
Yeah.
and put it together on that song.
Yeah.
It's on the record we gave
Yeah.
you. the
Yeah,
CD.
cool. Yeah. And on the soli part, you know.
We took his whole solo.
Took his whole- And the
La
recites and play.
da da di da
Yeah.
da da. That's
Yeah.
just like
Yeah.
Curtis. you know.
Yeah. And it was really funny watching him run into it.
Yeah,
I played that?
yeah, right. So, because since he died, you know, we kind of really, everybody misses him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because he could really set a fire up
Oh,
on
yes,
he
set a
could set a fire.
And,
He
and,
set a fire.
and in all sincerity, the two of us, and also a couple of the other guys, remember,
Yeah.
they feel every time Curtis makes his presence on that bandstand.
Yeah, yeah. Because I'll never forget,
They'll mention it.
we went to New Orleans right after Jimmy Noon died. Because
Yeah.
we were supposed to do this, the New Orleans Jazz Festival.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Jimmy Noon died in April, no, March, and we were supposed to be there in April, am I correct?
Yeah, that's it.
And so we had Ricky bring his clarinet to play the part that Jimmy
Yeah,
Noon would have
this
played.
is,
And Ricky started playing Ain't Nobody's Business, he does this thing. And all of a sudden, he took his clarinet out of his mouth and he looked at it. Then he started playing, and it sounded just like Jimmy Noon. Everybody
Jimmy Noon
knew
was
it.
playing through him. And
Everybody
the people
knew.
were walking, you know, you know, the tent. You
In
know,
the tent.
And it was crowded already. But
Everybody stopped.
it got, you could hear all silence.
It was
And,
the
and they looked right at him.
yes. And he
What a moving thing.
it was very, very
Oh.
weird. It was really,
Yeah.
really, it really was truly Jimmy Noon.
Yeah, yeah, because he was ever present.
My goodness gracious, I'll never forget
It
that.
was really something.
How's that for the power of music?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoever come up with that power,
Yeah, right on.
they can call it what they want. We
Yeah.
know that it exists. You know,
That's
it doesn't
right.
make any difference what you want to call it.
Yeah, 'cause-
Well, you're quite a poet, I have to say. I had to write down one of my favorite lines of yours.
Yeah.
Bought me a brand new hatchet, cut down my weeping
Cut
willow
down
tree.
my weeping willow
Ain't
tree.
that, ain't that wild?
Yeah. No more bending over backwards.
Yes.
I mean, that's
No
just,
bitter tears for me.
that is poetry.
Thank you.
Now-
That's Helen Dance's favorite song, by the way.
Yeah,
Brand new
yeah, it
Blues.
is. Yeah,
Yeah.
she yeah.
She said, "Don't tell Stanley."
Yeah. Yeah, that's my favorite. Don't tell Stanley.
I may have to say that.
Be
It's a real woman's song,
Yeah.
like a declaration.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is it that, this is probably an unanswerable question, but the blues has been so much a part, as a music in itself, but also giving rise to rock and roll and being it's so much a part of jazz music. I've always been fascinated by the blues as a form of music that allows so much to be done with it over and over and over.
Oh, yeah.
That the form is
Yeah.
so inevitable. You can always
Yeah.
feel where you are.
Yeah.
And maybe that's one of the beauties of it.
Maybe
Well,
that
it's-
is.
Yeah, and the simplicity of it.
It's
you
just,
know.
here we go again, simplicity.
Simplicity and,
Yeah.
and the way it falls. you see. No matter how the melody goes, but in terms of dealing with the progression, you know, fundamentally, it's symmetrical.
Perfectly symmetrical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no chord that jumps up that jerks you around in the wrong on a wrong beat.
No,
Uh-huh.
no Stravinsky there.
It just leads you right into
Yeah,
the
right.
next thing.
And it's so comforting.
You know,
Yeah.
because you know they're statements. It's like
Yeah.
telling a story.
Yeah, haiku.
You know, telling a story. You see, and so it's all there. It's like talking all the time.
All the time.
Yeah.
Conversation. You know. And like you're speaking on behalf of the blues in terms of expression, there is not one act of emotion, intellect, just name it, that deals with life on this planet Earth that can't be expressed with the blues.
With the blues. It's like when they said Shakespeare always only had 12 stories,
Yeah.
but then he was he's sort of like an astrologer.
12
12,
plus.
12 different signs,
Yeah.
and each one has its own characteristics.
Yeah.
So you can really,
Now, back to the 12 again.
Here we go.
12. I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, yeah.
You better believe it.
Well, I still, just like he said, it's all universal. But that's what makes it so wonderful about the blues.
Yeah.
It's universal, and you can take it anywhere. You can
Yeah.
take it to China. You can take it to Bong Bong,
Yeah.
Africa.
And
People will
it's-
stop,
Yeah, they recognize
and
it.
they recognize.
Because they call it spirit music.
Mhm.
Yeah,
They speak
we
on their
had it.
behalf.
Yes, we
Spirit
had it.
music.
We were playing at Sheraton, upstairs at the bar, and this African came in. He had another suit, three-piece suit. He
That's
sat
right.
there for a minute. He went back upstairs and come back in his robe.
Yeah, and this
Yes,
whole
this
regalia.
whole regalia. He says, "I must address you." He said, "You are playing spirit music."
Yeah.
And he
That's
sat down.
exactly what he said.
So help me. And I said to myself, "Oh."
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
kept playing, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But that's how much he gave to it.
Yeah.
He went up and had to redress.
Yeah. And to have that experience was a affirmation,
Yeah.
confirmation
Really?
of what is.
Yeah.
Whether we understand it totally or not,
No.
but it's a confirmation
We were
up
scared
to
to ask you what he
whatever
meant.
degree of our understanding it is, but it help to expand us and keep going, you know.
That's
Well,
true.
That's what we're talking about the faith, you know.
Yeah.
It help sustain and maintain, I call it.
Yes, that was a real
To
experience.
get to the next one. Yeah. It's really something. And now that we naturally via high tech communications and everything, and naturally we're hearing more on mass consciousness about global observations, etc. You know, and the whole bit. What's going to be interesting? We're going to hear some blues that come out of China, Japan, all over the world. Turkey doesn't make any difference. India doesn't make any difference.
I think so too.
And you're going to hear a reminiscent aspect of the blues.
Well, it
Muddy
has to-
Water fan.
It has to go on the great list of 20th century inventions, doesn't it?
Oh, I think so.
Blues, you know.
I think so.
Well-
Let's say 19th and 20th.
It's,
Yes,
it's,
yeah.
but, yeah,
Let's say
true.
that.
But
Right.
in reality, it's always been here.
You know,
Really?
somebody told me long years ago that there was African chiefs that went down this great river in Africa, and they sang, and they sang a song that was the melody of "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot."
Yeah, you see?
And I read that
Yeah, that's true.
in one of the history books that we have. We surrounded by books at home.
Yeah.
But I said to myself, why not?
Yeah. Because remember, that was part of that ritual in certain,
They put them on the boat. And
in
let
the
'em go
boat,
down.
you know, and be a falls, you know,
Right.
you put them in a river, then there's a falls.
There's a
And
falls that they go down.
And as the boat would do this,
They sing.
then there would be an ascension of the spirit of the person in the boat.
Uh-huh.
So they sang "Swing Low, Sweet Chariot." The melody.
The melody.
It wouldn't.
Yeah.
See the slave words.
Yeah.
Whatever they. Is this to me? Is this a remembrance of that
Yeah.
brought here,
Yeah.
and then they just put their words to it?
Yeah, you see what I mean?
But it's hard to say.
'Cause I refer to, you know, a certain aspect of, like, I think we all have what we consider a aspect of, not to minimize it, race memory.
I think it's in the genes.
You see.
You think it's in the genes?
Yeah,
I
that's
think
what I
there's a
mean.
memory,
Yeah.
Yeah.
a memory
Yeah.
that comes with,
Yeah,
come with all
it's
of
like
it.
a recording, because we have every, as it's spoken of from a scientific point of view, even though we say we forgot, it's
I
still
think
there.
it's still there.
And then at the same time, we say we forgot, then whatever time it happens, we recall it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like telling us something, that what we think we've lost, we haven't lost,
Uh-huh.
truthfully. It's still there.
I don't think otherwise. How would you? What would you say to a person that's 3 years old and writes all kind of sonatas? and
Yeah.
things?
You know, like,
Right.
like Mozart.
Right.
What?
What was he doing
You
at
know,
5
wait
years
a
old?
minute.
Yeah.
You gotta really think
Yeah.
that's. And we saw a kid.
What was you said? Go ahead.
We saw a kid in New Jersey.
Yeah.
He was about 9 years old, and we were playing on the pier.
Oh,
No.
I see. I see.
Oh, you yeah.
Okay,
and
that's
his
what
father.
it
You
was.
think about another one? Huh?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
He was playing this.
Alto.
His mother and father brought him up to our group. Said, "Our son can play the alto sax." Said, "Can he sit in with you?" Nah, we said, "Yeah." We
Yeah.
always were
Yeah.
open.
Yeah.
So he took his saxophone out of his case and put the mouthpiece on, and said, "I said, what would you like to play?" He says, "Now's the time." We said, "Okay, you said it." He said it, and played Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
And sound and everything that was Charlie Parker, this
Nuance.
kid played.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe
It's
it.
phenomenal.
We couldn't believe it. And he was born to do that.
Wow.
Yeah.
He was born to do that. And in fact, the guys took him aside, were talking
Yeah.
mouthpieces with him, everything.
Yeah. It was,
Oh, he was
it was beautiful.
I really
Yeah.
wonder what happened to that kid.
And to watch his attitude was
Yeah.
something, because
It was grown.
he was somebody.
He
you know
was
what I mean?
somebody.
Without a doubt, you know, you watch him, and
Yeah.
you know he knows
Stomp
he's
the band
somebody.
off. 1, 2. I said, whoa.
I mean, very big. Yeah.
Yes, and he wasn't a kid.
Right on.
He wasn't
No.
playing like a kid.
Like an old man with
He was
a,
an old
I mean,
man.
young soul with
Yeah,
with an old soul and young
Yeah,
body.
right.
That's what I'm trying to say.
He,
Yeah,
he wasn't
that's-
a
You
kid.
know what I mean?
He
That's what I'm
wasn't.
trying to
We didn't
picture.
tolerate him. He tolerated us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he took over,
He did.
Wow.
you know.
Ended the
Yeah.
band.
Righteously so.
Go on.
Rounded
take-
off everything, you know what I
take-
mean?
take him
No
home.
hanging out. Yeah.
Unbelievable.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
kid
the
can
reason-
play.
when she mentioned that, this other kid popped in my mind. We just saw him on TV. That little kid was doing that country thing with the
Oh.
with the little.
Oh, with the little accordion.
Concertina or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and it's solo. You know,
He was singing a Cajun song.
Cajun song. You know,
And,
and he was just singing this thing. And then when he would, passion, one, and when he would do that,
it was old.
he was
an
old
old
as
guy.
Methuselah.
Yeah.
Oh,
And his time was
time
perfect.
is just, you know,
Just perfect.
and he's this high, you
Just
know.
perfect. So where does he come
Yeah.
from?
Right.
It was amazing. You know, he felt and knew what he was
He
singing
did. He
about.
did.
Not just mimicking,
Mm-mm.
you know what I mean? Because there is that too. you
Yeah.
know. But he was in it.
No, that wasn't Suzuki.
No,
No,
no, definitely
That was
not.
too tough for Suzuki.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, let me catch up on a couple things
Okay.
in your history here about when did you first have a chance to accompany some of those singers that Dinah Washington and
Actually, that was all through the 50s, most of it. Big Maybelle and Jimmy Witherspoon and Dinah Washington and what was his
Mr.
name?
5 by
Mr.
5.
5x5.
Jimmy Rush.
Jimmy Russian, who came, and I had never played I Want a Little Girl to Call My Own.
Why on you?
No,
Oh.
Jimmy Russian. I said, because none of them had music.
Yeah.
They never had any music. So, and I'm used to reading everything, see. So he says, I said, but I don't know that song. He says, it goes like this. He sits down to play more piano than most piano players.
no kidding?
He's very excellent pianist.
Yeah.
Showed me the bridge, ya da 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 da. Whew, okay. And but he was very nice. And I played with let's see, Big Mama Thornton. And they were all,
And also Joe Williams.
Joe Williams and Wynonna Harris.
Yeah, Wynonna Harris.
And it was lucky because it was all in that same area like Columbus, Springfield, and Dayton. And so because we were like the house band in Ohio. It was in Ohio. And some of it was in Buffalo, New York, where they had this club,
That's right.
where I played for Big Maybell. You heard of Big Maybell?
Sure.
Right? Big Maybell. What do you
Oh,
mean?
go ahead. Talk about
Big Maybell was. We had our day off, and I had gone to bed, and the bass player, his name was Shakespeare. We called him Shakespeare because he could read his own poem. And he came and knocked on my door. He said, Jeannie, get up. There's a woman down here made me give her all my money. I knew he was so tight. He'd tell us, I'm not buying any Christmas gifts, so don't buy me anything. That's how tight he was. So I knew if she made him give her all his money, I knew that something was really up. So I got dressed real fast and we went down, and there were limousines all around this club. We could hardly push our way in. And here was this lady with this baby face. She weighed almost 350 pounds. And she was going through the aisle singing, baby, please don't go. And as she'd walk, she had these pockets. And people were stuffing $100 bills.
Yeah.
And she was still saying, she'd hit that hip,
Yeah.
make that money go down in there and keep moving. But
Yeah.
tears were coming down her cheeks singing this song. And I never heard or saw anything like that. This is the interracial audience.
She was fantastic.
It was full of people with limousines. They had
Yeah.
come from miles around to watch this woman sing. She
Yeah.
could really, really work a crowd.
Oh,
And she could make you cry.
Yeah,
And she'd
really.
sing songs that you know, I tell you what was wonderful about people like her. And Joe Williams, a lot of them, they all sang not just blues, not just rhythm and blues.
Yeah.
They sing songs like, if God made me a king,
Yeah.
I'd be but a fool for you. They sing all those beautiful
yeah.
ballads.
Oh, they're singing trees.
And Tree, yes.
I think that I shall
Never see, yeah, lovely as a tree. Yeah, that was the blind man. That was his thing.
Oh, you think?
Yeah, because I played
Al
for him
Hibbler.
to Al Hibbler.
Oh, Al.
Yeah, I played for Al Hibbler and Al.
That was one of his favorites.
And he would hang out at this nightclub after we got through playing the show, and it's called Benny Rivers. And he'd stand out in front of the place, and he'd tell all the guys, they'd have bets, and money he was passing along. He says, all right, Al, what's coming now? He could say he could tell an ugly woman or a pretty woman. He's blind, you know, right? And so now they didn't know how he was figuring that out. And so he said, listen, is this an ugly woman? He said, okay, they have to give him the money. Here come a pretty one. Oh, this one is gorgeous. And he said, you sure you can't see? You know, do this? He said, no, you can tell the way they walk. He said, ugly people drag their feet.
That's right.
You see, you know, and he would win all their money. They never did figure out how he did it.
He was aware of the attitude.
He
of
did.
the
He would wear the
sound.
attitude and the sound. See that sound?
From the sound and the way
He
that.
said, ugly women. He said, ugly women drag their feet.
That's right.
Yeah.
And and he walked the heels of the back of their shoes.
Oh,
Walk,
well, yeah,
walk
just-
on the heels of the back of their shoes.
You know, that made me really, really, really be aware. I said, this guy, he win more money than they played on the gig.
Yeah.
He was a funny guy. He
Yeah.
said he says, I can tell a Cadillac.
Yeah.
He put his hand on it. He said, and he could feel how the paint. He could tell the different paint.
Uh-huh.
He could tell the difference between a Cadillac and a Ford. I saw this in my own eye. Yeah. So
So you were in a house band, the singers would come through, and
Yeah.
you'd just do your best to
Yeah.
fit into their...
Oh, yeah.
that
their
was
song
it was
list.
very easy for us because, first of all, we were very good musicians.
Mhm.
Second of all, they would come in the night before they're supposed to open and watch the other guy close.
Yeah.
So we had a chance to talk to them, you know,
Yeah.
sit at the bar and hang out
Yeah.
and talk. And so we connect with their attitude right away.
Yeah.
See? And in fact, what I was thinking about, Joe Jones' cousin is, it was Wynonna Harris.
Yeah.
That's his first cousin. And Wynonna, when he rehearsed, he says, okay, he said, play me a shuffle in B flat. Dun-dun-dun-dun-dun-dun. That's enough. That rehearsal was over.
That's it. What did he call
He called me Miss Box. Yeah. The piano, they call the piano a box. He
Yeah.
said, Miss Box is here. and then after, sometime at intermission, he'd put this turban on, and he and our bass player would tell fortune
Yeah.
and make extra money. But look, he was really a psychic person. He really could read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Winona
Yeah, he was
Harris.
clairvoyant.
Very, very clairvoyant, and so was Shakespeare. So they used to
Yeah.
sit there and make extra money at intermission.
What about Joe Williams in Buffalo?
Oh
he
yeah.
came through all this snow, that big.
We don't know how he got there. It was one of those big Buffalo
Unusual
snow.
Syracuse, Buffalo, New York,
Yeah.
water towns.
And Miles
heavy
Davis
snow.
was supposed to be there,
Yeah.
and
He-
Joe
he was
Williams.
there.
He was there. They made it through
Sarah
because
Vaughan couldn't make it.
Sarah Vaughan couldn't make it, but Joe made it. But his band didn't make it.
Yeah, that's the other.
So they called us to get a eight-piece,
Yeah,
eight-piece,
well,
eight-piece group
band.
together to play with Joe Williams.
Yeah.
And he was very nice, but he kind of every
Yeah.
time they see a lady piano player, they always go
Yeah.
like they're in
Yeah.
pain. And it really made me mad, but I knew I could do whatever he wanted. He says, "Okay," he put his music up there, and I started playing. It was the blues in G. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, he asked you.
He says, "Go ahead and play." You know, he said, "You open it up." I think he wanted to find out where I was at before he started.
Yeah.
And so I started playing, and big old baby Grand Steinway, and the audience started going, whoa, whoa. And then they started cheering, whoa. He said, "Take another one, take another one." He's smart, see?
Yeah.
But I'll never forget that. Then we played his show, bang, 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 right down like that.
Yeah, he rode that energy.
Yeah, he had a
That's
good time.
right.
He said, "This is the best band ever. I'll take you guys on the road."
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we wailed behind him.
Yeah. That was a great experience. That's the first time I'd ever played for him.
Yeah. Well, he knows how to work the audience. Can you tell me about the first time that you heard one of your own arrangements played that really gave you a thrill?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it.
I think it was Clyde Riesinger for me. When
yeah.
they did,
But, yeah, well, when I was trying to
he's gonna go
lead up
back
to
for
that.
yeah.
But that was one of the,
Mhm.
that was really one of the thrills because we weren't in Buffalo then, you know.
No, we were in New York
And,
City.
With who now?
Clyde Riesinger,
Clyde Riesinger.
his big band.
He used to be a great lead player when he was he lived in Hollywood, in Los Angeles too.
Mhm.
And so he worked the studio, did a lot of good lead playing and stuff like that. And then he moved to New York, and that's when we saw him again. You know,
Yeah, we rehearsed with the big band.
and rehearsed with the big band and everything. And we recorded with him.
Yeah, sure
and
did.
everything. And that was great, you know, because you know we said that where we featured him, that was on
Right on Homeward Bound.
Homeward Bound.
Homeward Bound.
Uh-huh.
One of the
Yeah.
tunes we wrote, you know.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
and
So to hear
he,
them,
he just loved it because
Oh.
he had never had anybody write a feature for him
Mhm.
and set him up. So
Yeah.
he said, well, to him, he considered the best balance that he's ever
Wow.
enjoyed performing.
it's a great arrangement.
Uh-huh.
In fact, who had the
And we had a-
arrangement now?
Um,
I'm gonna talk about him because he's supposed to send it back so we can get copies of it.
Oh,
was that the drummer that has the band
Yeah.
in LA?
Yeah, you probably interview him anyway.
Yeah. I can't think of it right
Mhm.
now. I'm looking at his face.
I think that was. I think, and then when we heard ourselves on radio for the first time with the Sweet Baby Blues Band.
Yeah, that was the other thrill.
And,
you know,
I bet.
yeah, you know, on record.
It was it was really
Yeah,
startling
Yeah.
to say the least.
yeah,
You know, well, that really was a thrill.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah.
that was mind blowing.
Mhm.
Because you know, in a sense, because I'm trying to recall when I wrote this or wrote that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and it was kind of hard to recall it
Uh-huh.
because, like
It
I said,
sounded like somebody else.
yeah, that's because, like I said, you know, because I did a lot. In fact, both of us
Mhm.
did a lot with our intuitivity, you know, intuitiveness.
Mhm.
You see,
Uh-huh.
and so you do those things, and it's like not only in the writing but also solo wise. So, you know, to recall what you played.
Now
that
that's
it's very
different.
difficult for either one of us.
Yeah.
And then when we hear it back, it sounds like somebody else is playing.
Mm.
You know, and then you realize that it's not anybody else because you look at it and it says so and so. You know what I mean?
Was I really on this?
It's it's mind blowing. You know,
yeah.
where was I when this was happening?
Yeah.
Well, you've both been in the education field for a while. Is there any way you can teach intuitiveness?
I don't think so.
No, intuitiveness, I think, is endowed, you know, and I
Yeah.
think, you know, everybody is endowed with,
Everybody has some of it.
has whatever, you know, I would say everybody has a certain aspect of intuitiveness, depending upon how it's utilized, exercised,
Uh-huh.
you see.
Yeah.
Because to me, that's part of the sensitivity, part of the sensitivity that exists in all of us in terms of dealing with survival.
Yeah. I'm always amazed how a person can be intuitive in this area and completely blank right here.
That's right.
That always amazes me.
Yeah.
Because to me, if you're intuitive, you're intuitive. It will, but that's that different. There's a different era now. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So before everything became so compartmentalized.
Compartmentalized. In other words, you know,
Very weird.
coming into the 50s, you know, right out of the late 40s, but especially after World War II,
Yeah.
on up to now in terms of high tech, we entered into the age of specialists.
Yeah, right.
So we divided up the human body.
Right.
If you got an earache on the left side, you go to see a doctor who does left ear. You got the right side, a doctor with the right ear, and the eye
brain
same
side,
way. So
yeah.
you're all divided up,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and you got to go through all of this to find out what's wrong.
That's right.
You
And you
know.
got to see about 6 of
You
them
know,
first
and
before
then-
they
Yeah.
decide
In
which.
the meantime,
right.
they've written up all these prescriptions for you
Yeah, right.
that
Yeah,
breaks
man.
down the rest of your part of your body while you're trying to take care of heal that.
Nah,
Not all of them, but you know.
it's
at least.
rough.
Yeah.
So it becomes pretty well. In other words, I think that's where I think the basic sense, again, we go back to that education, having that foundation.
Yeah.
You see, when you deal with, you know, the nature of what is,
Mhm.
and then go from there. You see, you know, and lots of luck.
Yeah. Did you guys started playing professionally about what time? About it
From
was-
9 to 1?
No.
Oh, you don't mean that, huh?
No.
Oh.
I mean,
Oh.
that's standard hours. I
You
think.
stand
More than that, we get overtime,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, was it in the mid to late 50s that you started
Uh,
playing?
Oh, way before that.
Yeah, before
I think I can say that I was a professional in 1950.
then? Okay.
That is in jazz music
Hmm.
and classical music.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just wondering if the rock and roll era and the British invasion of rock and roll and Elvis and all that, if that affected
It did.
your employment.
It did. It did.
Oh, yeah.
It did. That's why
Yeah.
we were slick enough to go to Canada, our group,
Yeah.
because Canada was
survived.
20 years behind the United States.
Mhm.
Exactly 20 years. So when we went to Canada, we were like heroes, and they really thought that we were the cats to be out, and we could play Duke Ellington, and we could play Count Basie, we could play. Of course, we had to do Blueberry Hill, but
Fats
Fats
Domino.
Domino, they said in
Fats
Quebec. Fats Domino. But by the same time, Louis Armstrong had a hit on Blueberry Hill
Yeah,
also.
too.
See, although we would throw in some of those kind of songs, we'd always do jazz.
Yeah.
We'd always do Cherokee, like for the band tune, you know, and take fours and do the thing. And they would always be amazed, you know. In fact, that's where I saw Dizzy thought the same thing, because his band was staying in the same hotel we were during that time when nobody could get arrested in the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Go to Toronto or
Yeah.
go to Quebec
Yeah.
City.
Yeah,
That was like going to Europe.
yeah,
So we were smart enough to
yeah.
kind of move ourselves around. You only had to come out, let's see, about every 3 or 6 months you had to come out for 2 weeks. Or become a citizen or something like
Uh-huh.
that. And that's why a lot of times we'd come to Buffalo and hang out for, with the jam sessions and whatever.
Right.
They close at midnight.
Yeah, on Sunday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Saturdays.
So that extended our time because everybody else was getting killed. You know,
Yeah.
we had one short period in, I'll say about 1954. When we were in Canada, we almost got clobbered in Canada. The Queen came over, and they had, and she had decided she wanted to love country and western.
Yeah.
And for a short
Yeah.
short time, that's all there was in Toronto. And every joint but ours was country and western people, even though they were from New York. But they didn't. The Canadians didn't know that. You know, these guys coming there from New York.
Okay.
Where if you play guitar and sing Red River Valley, you could get a gig in Toronto. And this is true. The whole country went country.
Yeah.
It's true. And we had to wait that out.
Uh-huh.
You know, see, we do rock and roll in the United States and country and western for a while there. We didn't work too good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been with a couple different record labels. You've-
Not really.
Mostly Concord.
Concord is
right?
really our
In
main
terms
one.
of our own individual.
Yeah.
Your thing has
performance.
been on
Yeah.
Concord.
Concord was,
was good for
was
us.
the initiator.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
You know.
When you record, it's almost a silly question in some cases, but do you all play at the same time?
Well, main thing, they never see the arrangements till we get to the studio.
Yeah.
We never rehearse.
Uh-huh.
No.
And most of the stuff we did was one take. See, very seldom we had to do two takes,
Mhm.
Yeah.
which kept the stuff edgy
It sure-
and
it sure
yeah,
fresh.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't record the rhythm section and then
Oh,
do the
no.
vocals
Oh,
and all, you
no.
know.
No.
I mean, I knew the answer to that because I could tell.
Well, a
but
lot
I
of
wanted to
people
hear from
didn't,
you.
because
Oh,
Dick,
sure.
Dick up in Denver that used
Oh,
to do
yeah.
the jazz parties.
Do the jazz parties.
Dick Gibson.
Dick
Gibson.
Gibson, when we came up there to do his jazz party, he insisted on, I have a good piano player for you. I said, I'm the piano player. He said, you didn't do it on your records.
He
Now,
didn't believe it.
he had been playing our records for about 4 years on his radio show.
His son. Yeah, yeah, you're right, you're right.
Yeah. And I
his
said,
son.
I've always played my, he said, you never did that. I said, look at the record. I always play my own music, and I never do it and then sing. I always do it at the same time.
Simultaneous.
And so he said, I got wonderful piano players for you. I said, well, I'm going to be it. I'm it. You know, he didn't want
Shook him up.
He didn't want me to play.
Yeah, it shook him up.
He didn't want me to play.
No, because he had his own.
He had his own idea about who. Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
see, that was his plantation.
Uh-huh.
Well, it was.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, he
Shifting
felt
everybody
he had
around,
control.
you play
'cause he-
this.
Oh, you play over here.
Yeah,
with
that's
this
right,
person,
You
you
yeah.
play
put this one with
person,
that one and
you
that
play
one,
Yeah.
whether they fit or not.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that can be a dicey
Well,
game
it's a
to
challenge.
play. Yeah.
Those guys came through like champs because
Uh-huh.
they're all good.
Yeah, you know.
You know, and they knew it was just a gig.
But and at the same time, what was the most beautiful thing about it, the caliber of jazz musicians
Right.
involved. You see, they know they've met Grace,
Yes,
and they know Grace.
that's right.
They've been all over the world.
See?
They played kings and queens, and,
That's right.
and etc.
Mhm.
Shahs, and just name it.
That's
you see.
right. So, you know,
So, you know,
they
what
overcame.
is what you know? How, there's no way in the world he could shake them up. No way. You know,
No.
they just give him that grace period.
Uh-huh. I've enjoyed hearing from people like Clark Terry and
Yeah.
basically what you're saying, that a lot of the musicians I've spoken to along the way have met with either racial or other obstacles, and
Mm.
that they've said to themselves, no way is this going to
No way.
change me.
No.
It's your problem
Right.
that
That's right.
I'm comfortable
I
with
met
myself.
not only race, but sexist.
Mhm.
That's right.
So I get a double whammy. In
That's
fact, we
right.
played for a guy. Remember the guy right here in San Diego? And so when we came to the place, this organist was sitting there playing to the bartender. So we told him we want to start a jam session. He says, he's from St. Louis. He said, oh, okay. He said, Peanuts Huckle's my friend. He said, I know all about jam sessions. We got this jam session going, and you couldn't move in there.
Yeah. I was on Harbor Island.
On Harbor Island. And so after 3 weeks, and I said, Jimmy, it's time for the hit for a raise now, you know.
Mhm.
So we went to the guy. I said, we want to talk to you. He said, it's time for us to get a raise. He says, I'm not going to give you a raise, he told me. I said, okay, then we'll go somewhere else. He said, no, don't do that. He said, but if I give you a raise, I have to give the organ player a raise. Because he's a man.
Yeah.
I said, but he's not playing anything. When we came here, he was just playing to the bartender. What do you mean? I said, but you can do anything you want to get your money as long as you give us a raise. He refused to give me a raise without giving that guy a raise. He said, because he's a man.
Yeah. Yeah. Had that real chauvinistic thing.
And my
Yeah.
mom always told me, she said, when they talk like that, she said, just imagine them in boxer shorts and keep moving. That's right.
Then it becomes with a great sense of humor.
Yeah. Well,
Knowing how to cope.
yeah.
Yeah.
Keep moving, that's the important part too.
Yes, indeed.
So you divide your time now here in San Diego between teaching and going out and playing gigs
Right.
and recordings. And
Mhm.
We've done clinics and
Yeah.
things like
Yeah.
that too. Yeah. It's been very rewarding, I say, you know. Again, it becomes very difficult to, you know, like, you know, outside traveling hassles and things like that, but
Yeah.
in terms of actual, once you get on the stage performance, they've been very,
It's worth it.
you know,
It's worth it.
you know, we come out, as they say, you know, as they say, smelling like a rose. And
Uh-huh.
hey, whatever we went through before, we don't even get into it because it was worthwhile to get to this.
did you ever have the 7-year period where you were saying to yourself, I don't know if I can keep doing this?
Not yet. Not yet. I think, I'm not too sure. I think we're very fortunate. And I'm not quite sure why. And, but so far, so good. And I think because both of us are relatively healthy, and even with and with the advent of the new musicians, then they've been with us now 3 years at least. But they've fell into the family mode that we love,
Yeah.
that we had with Curtis and Red Callender
Yeah.
and Jimmy. Lou. In fact, Cat Daddy told me, that's Cat Daddy, we call him Cat Daddy.
The trumpet player,
The trumpet player, Nolan.
Nolan's.
Uh-huh.
He said, when I first got in this band, he says, I used to say, why are those people calling me, why are they asking me how I feel? And he couldn't figure that out.
Yeah.
Because he although he was the first trumpet player for, lead trumpet player for Count Basie for a while,
Yeah.
even at a young age,
Mhm.
he had also played with a couple of rock and roll people, and they paid him a great salary and everything.
Yeah,
But they
Motown.
just come and do what they do, and everybody splits. You know,
Yeah.
nobody.
Yeah.
So he wasn't quite used to this way.
Camaraderie.
But it's a family, and
Yeah.
and gradually these young ones have come into the family. You know, a way of taking care of each other.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah. The first thing they'll call up, hey, how you feeling? You know,
Yeah.
things, you know, and then
Turn
when
it
they-
around and
yeah,
send it
Yeah,
back.
then we got on the gig. Everybody's hugging you.
Yeah,
and everybody
yeah.
come up, hey, how
It's
you doing? How you
wonderful.
feeling?
It's truly
they
wonderful.
hug you. You don't want to make sure they hug you and they know how you feel.
Yeah, right.
See? I mean,
So it's wonderful. Our
Yeah.
second family is just as nice as the
Yeah.
first.
Yeah.
yeah, it's really, it's like a blessing in a way.
Really is. We've been very, very, very fortunate.
Yeah.
Tell me about the PBS special you did with Sippy Wallace
And Big Mama?
and Big Mama.
That was our concept.
Yeah.
And this lady at KPBS came to us and asked us if we wanted to do some kind of special or what we wanted to do. She said it'd be a half hour. And so we told her what ideas we had about bringing Big Mama and Sippy Wallace and myself together as 3 generations of the blues. So she worked very hard, and we got this
She
thing
did.
going. And when it was the rainiest day, and we were doing the jam session still,
Uh-huh.
and we had this, and we set it up so that Sippy would do the first whole show, hour.
Yeah.
This is at the Belly Up.
And Tavern.
Tavern
which
here.
is up north,
Uh-huh.
Solana
Uh-huh.
Beach.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then Big Mama would do hers,
She do her.
and then I would do mine.
Yep.
And at the end of mine, we'd do finale. But we didn't tell Sippy or Big Mama they're going to do a finale.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
I was gonna go down.
See, because they are very honorary people, both of them. And we didn't want them to throw anything into the works. So Sippy, she did hers, and Big Mama did hers.
Yeah.
And then when I did mine, then I said, ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to have a good old-fashioned finale.
Yeah.
And we're going to call up these ladies, Sippy Wallace and Big Mama Thornton. They stopped.
Yeah.
They were at the bottom and still watching me because they had never heard me sing.
Yeah.
And I had played for Big Mama all these
Oh, yeah.
years, and she had never heard me
Oh.
She
sing.
didn't even know she could.
She didn't know I could sing. See, this is our first time. So here, they were standing at the bottom of the stage watching me, And so here they come up on the stage. Now they're going to show this young whippersnapper who, Sippy Wallace came up there and she started singing to Big Mama
Yeah,
and telling her off,
yeah,
making up lyrics.
yeah. Oh, yeah. She was improvising.
She was improvising, and so Big Mama
Telling her
was
just how she thought.
Big Mama would take a part, and then Big Mama said, "Yeah, you will come to my house, and I'm gonna kick you out of my back door." Oh no, you won't.
Oh,
And I got so intrigued watching them fight until I forgot I was supposed
Yeah.
to sing too.
and I kind of, you know, because I could see the cameras was on them, you know.
Yeah,
I said, you better get in there because it'll never happen. If you-
really. And cause I forgot, I was fascinated watching them.
yeah, she
I'm
was
so used to playing for somebody else.
accompanying, you know.
And I said, ladies, you don't have to fuss and fight. You know.
And when she did that, in fact, when you see it, and when she did it, because she had that little light growl, I mean, she sliced through the whole thing, you know.
Yeah.
And when she did that, everybody said, I mean, immediately like lightning struck them, you know. And they looked to her, and that's when the camera hit her.
Yeah. And so, boy, it was a great,
And
it
she
was a
went
great
into it.
moment.
And then it became a thing, you know.
Because they had been fighting in the dressing room.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, if you had tried to stage that,
No way.
way. No. You know what? This is one of the things that paid us off in terms of experience. 'Cause
Yeah.
we played shows and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
sepia clubs and all that kind of thing, you know. So you learn that in terms of dealing with the art of improvisation, you got to have a surprise.
Yeah.
You can't
You
really,
can't tell them everything.
Other than that, everybody knows everything, so
Yeah.
everybody gonna play their hot licks or whatever it is,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's all over after
Yeah.
that, you know. But this way, you get the spontaneity going.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's there.
And I do the same thing with my students.
Yeah.
They don't know how the program is gonna go until we hit the
That's
stage.
true.
They know the music,
Yeah.
you know, up to a point, you know.
Right.
But they don't know what I'm gonna do with it once we get on the stage too.
And the guys never knew who our guest artist was going to be.
That's right.
For that particular.
For any
any-
album we've
any
ever
album.
Oh,
done,
I see.
they never knew
Yeah.
who the guest artist was.
Yeah, because they try to figure that out. They call up and say, "What's so and so? Who's the guest star?"
Who's the guest
You know what I
star?
mean? They try to get you to slip up. you
Yeah,
know?
so we wouldn't tell them.
And we wouldn't tell 'em, you
Well,
know.
when Lockjaw came, Lockjaw flew in from Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
And they were all getting themselves together in the studio. He came in. He said, "Gentlemen." And then,
Blew their mind. Yeah. Just
It
blew
was
their
wonderful.
mind.
That's a great way to make people want to come to work, too,
and
man.
yeah, and,
Yeah.
you know, and they really played.
Oh,
Because they
you
wanna
know,
impress
talk about-
him.
Yes, yes.
They were so happy to see
The
John.
spirit go. Oh, the rush. You could
You
feel
know.
it. You know, beautiful rush.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
they're really
I
wild.
think you guys ought to write a book.
Well, we're working on it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah, we're-
You know, Sippy
yeah.
and Big Mama were fighting in the dressing room.
Yeah.
One would sit on that end, one sit on.
Yeah.
And now that's the one thing we didn't know. We thought we just needed one
Yeah.
dressing room. And so Sippy said, now Big Mama is big. She got big feet like this. And Sippy's got little tiny feet. So Sippy says, she says, my granddaughter bought me these shoes. And she says, they're a size 4 and they're too big. So Big Mama said, I don't know why you complaining. You ought to be glad you got feet. And so then Sippy said a word that I can't say on the camera. And so it got really blue in there. And I said to myself, boy, nobody knows these two ladies aren't ladies. They're no longer ladies.
Yeah, they.
Wow.
Never heard such.
Yeah. It was really something.
You ought to be glad.
Did
you
that
got-
ever, when you had first started to conceive of this program, did you think that might happen?
No,
You
it
didn't?
never occurred to me.
Yeah.
Never.
No,
but I
way.
forgot that thing
Yeah,
because almost all vocalists. Sure,
Yeah. Oh,
Jeannie,
yeah.
watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah. She said
But they
almost,
don't,
so we can,
sometimes they don't like each other. So.
Yeah, yeah,
And they call each other names behind each other's
Yeah,
back.
you know.
I don't know why they.
they have an accent, right?
you know, I think you have, because you play piano so well, I think it gives you a leg up on your confidence level.
Well, that's why they do
They
that because
are-
they don't. They're at your mercy.
They are sure at your mercy.
They are
that's
at
right.
your
That's right.
mercy.
And you're
That's
not,
right.
and
Yeah.
I think it makes a big difference.
Oh,
It does.
It does, definitely.
It
Yeah.
does, because
that-
remember that one that had the attitude in Buffalo came on and
Oh, yeah.
decided, well, I'm not used to having a woman piano player.
Yeah.
And I've had Hank Jones play for me, and I've had this person. And I said to myself, why is she saying that? And so she put her music up there and blah, blah. And so then she started singing My Funny Valentine. And so every time she said, My Funny Valentine, I'd move it up a half step. Sweet comic Valentine, another half step. You made me smile with your... And I said, nah, that'll teach her. And so after that, she had much respect.
Yeah.
Now,
Don't mess with,
You have
you don't mess.
You just
No.
don't do that.
No.
You know, that's just like
especially in front of somebody
that's,
else.
that's like
You know.
arguing with the waiter, you know, with your food, you know.
Yeah, go back in the
And it's-
kitchen
you know,
and decorate it for you. You might not
don't
like the
know
way
what
they
you eat.
decorate. So they, don't be messing with. Don't be,
There should be a book of quotes, you know.
Well,
The Cheatham say, don't mess with the waiter and don't mess with the piano player.
yeah,
right.
right.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
she got respect.
Yeah.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Right. Well, you really should consider a book, you know.
Well, we're kind of working on
Kinda
one.
working
Yeah,
on
you
one.
got, I mean, it's a long process, and you have to,
Yeah.
but you've got a lot of, what was it like working in you did some Broadway shows
Oh, boy.
and
Yeah.
all that?
Yeah. Yeah. That was another, you know, like a great experience, you know, broadening experience, you know, to be called in as a sub, you see. So every time I did one, there was no rehearsal. That's where the challenge was, you know. And as you say, sustaining and maintaining confidence,
Yeah.
you see, because you had no idea, you know, what's going on. Every now and then, maybe you'd have an opportunity to go in, maybe at a matinee or something, and sit in the pit, you know, and you know, just see what's going on. But most of the time, like, pew, and you know, you get there an hour ahead of time, you know, and then the conductor comes over. Oh, you're such a so and so and so. That didn't work out, you know. You watch. You know.
Plus, you have to, it's not like a jazz gig where you're being able to improvise a lot.
No.
So you're just
Oh, no.
reading those notes.
No, everything has to be right
Yeah.
there, you know, because, you know, you know, because that, you're dealing with the performance on the stage, you know, singing-wise and stuff like that, you know, and everything, and dancing and all that bit, so you definitely learn quickly how not to mess with the rhythm by coming in wrong.
Oops.
You know,
Excuse me.
you see,
Didn't say
things
oops.
are kind of faux pas. Best you leave it out and pick up the slack on the next phrase, you know, or the next letter or whatever, you know,
Yeah.
rather than, you know, try to stiff it through and be sticking out there like a sore thumb. Everybody be dancing there, turn around.
Yeah,
What's going on?
yeah. That takes a lot of nerve.
But that was a, you know, that was a, really, I could say, a very, very great experience, you know. And it taught me a lot, you know, and also in terms of how to share that, I learned through that process, share that with, you know, in terms of education students.
Uh-huh.
Like from that point, dealing with the attitudes and emotions of everybody concerned.
What do you think about the state of jazz today?
Boy, that's too hard to answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's too hard. I'm not too sure exactly how to answer that.
Yeah. Only thing I relate to is it's in constant flux.
Yeah.
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 That's-
And a lot of
that's-
great kids coming
you
up
know.
too.
Yeah. We got a lot of good,
A lot of good ones.
with good musicianship, good soul feeling, and everything, you know. They're really sincere, and not only in terms of the dedicated profession, but in their dedication, it shows because they're reaching back in their history, getting
Ah.
the continuity,
Yeah.
you see. And in other words, they listen, like Papa Joe, they pull my coat, you know. So in turn, I'm pulling coats, and so that's where, you know, the relay stick, you pass the
Yeah.
relay stick.
Right.
So,
Right.
so out of that process, you know, you can see some good coat pulling happening, you know. Yeah. And what has helped is actually the increase in some aspect of recognizing jazz education, you know, in the schools and being exposed to it, you know, now even at a much earlier age than ever before in the past, say, before 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There's a big increase now.
And the things that you all are doing.
Yeah, yeah, well, that's all a part of it, yeah,
Because-
definitely.
Because jazz is to be listened to, and
Yeah.
if they can hear it from people that have done it,
Yeah, yeah.
instead of imagining what's
Yeah,
going down,
yeah.
they can at least
Yeah.
see us.
And the most important
It's
thing,
very important.
yeah, if they can hear and see it
Yeah.
simultaneously, so if it's alive, it's even greater. But if not, hey, a videotape or a movie, the
Yeah,
old movies
yeah.
and things like
Right.
that, just get, if it's no more than that one little slot, you know
Yeah.
what I mean, where, like High Society, we were talking about coming here, you know, I was watching it the other night, late, on a late TV movie, you know, with Bing Crosby, Louis Armstrong,
Oh, yeah.
and Frank Sinatra, you know, and it was a beautiful thing to see, you know. Louis opened up the whole picture, you know, and he said, now the story began, after he finished, you know. And then we go through the whole thing, you know, and then at the end, they're doing another number, and he plays, and he takes his horn out, and he said, now the story ends.
That was
And it was so beautiful.
No
you
one
know.
else could have pulled that
Recapitulation,
off.
you know what I mean? A recap.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Especially when he's so infectious, you know,
Uh-huh.
with his personality.
I noticed that you had played with Ornette Coleman, too.
I actually was on a very short experience, but a very broad one, and that was when he had received the Guggenheim Award, you know,
Uh-huh.
and commissioned to do his piece "Skies of America."
Oh, yeah, a
You
big
see.
orchestral.
Yeah, big
piece.
orchestra.
Yeah.
And so the contractor had contacted a friend of mine, a French horn player, Les Salomon, who was responsible for me playing shows and things
Yeah,
like that.
Les. I
And,
remember Les.
And also, my friend Frank Como, who I went to school with at New York Conservatory of Modern Music, in terms of copying, you know, we were also professional copyists and orchestrators and all that too, see. So in dealing with that for him, that's when he was living, had his place on Prince Street, you know, loft. And so what happened, we, you know, for the rehearsal, Les asked me to bring my horn because they wanted to make sure I had everybody covered. And so, sure enough, we brought passed the music out and everything. And so that's how I got to play him, because one of the trombone players was late,
Oh.
you see. And so I sat down, and he was rehearsing. He was trying to get the reed section to do something, but he was speaking on behalf of nuances and everything. And he would play it, and he would try to get them to see if they could interpret it
Uh-huh.
as close as it possibly could. And it was not your job, because these were all legit players, you know.
Yeah.
Really, they weren't all jazz. It was a mixture of jazz players. Like the trombone player, I took, you know, fine jazz musician. And anyway, the the trombone player finally showed up, you know. And so he was sitting there, and he said, well, what's wrong? He said, where's my part? And I realized I had his part.
Oh.
He said, oh. I said, well, here. You know, here's this part here, you know. And this is, there's a bassoon part, and I'll take the bassoon part. And so I spent that whole 2 hours, you know, professional pay of 2-hour rehearsal with a, you know, a small symphonette, you know, working with my level. And then at the same time, both Les and I had explained to him that under the circumstances, you have such a problem, you know. He would never, we told him he'd go broke before he could ever get that recorded. So we suggested to him that, look, go to England. The scale for everything, rehearsal and everything, is cheaper,
Oh,
you see. And that's where he recorded. He recorded it
That's right.
in England, you see. You know. and I still got the bassoon part. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so that was
Yeah.
that was actually my experience with it, which was a great experience
Right.
to see him handle all this and,
Yeah.
and deal with it.
Yeah.
You know, and then finally, get a copy of the recording to see how it came out, and how you're going to beat the BBC.
Well,
hey,
this is, you guys are going to be celebrating your, what anniversary now, coming up? Now there's a
Let me
real tough
see.
question,
Yeah.
right?
Let me see. Well, since 1954,
yeah,
so that's 40 and
45,
45.
40, actually 44.
September
That's
30th.
great.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been patting our foot to music and,
Yeah, I must have,
and playing with each other.
music keeps you young.
Oh,
Oh, yeah,
You
I
know?
think it does.
you can
Yeah.
say that again. I'm a strong voucher for that. You know, I like
And
to
you
see
really,
her.
and you really got to take care of yourself on the road.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
See, that's
yeah.
believe me. And everybody in our new band, they eat grass and seeds.
Yeah,
They-
yeah.
Well, they fast and they
Yeah.
have, and so, well, Cat Daddy's a professional runner. He's
Yeah.
a
Uh-huh.
champion in his age
Age
group.
group.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And these guys just don't drink.
yeah,
They don't drink. They eat salads and stuff like that.
Yeah. Nuts and fruits.
Yeah.
Well, this group of guys and you are going to last a long time then. I
Well, as long as
suspect.
we keep drinking our gin and eating our steak,
Balance.
that's that balance.
Got to have that balance.
That's right.
Well,
Say that again.
Yeah.
this has been a great pleasure for me
Oh.
to talk to you.
Same
Mutually
And,
so. Believe me, this has
Yes,
really been beautiful.
Look forward to it, and I hope that your next recording is soon.
We hope
and,
so too.
We hope
you
so
know?
too. We're
Yeah.
working on it.
Mhm.
And I hope that we can get you out on our end of the country.
I hope you can bring the whole band out so they can
Yeah.
really show 'em what the Kansas City style is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, on behalf of Hamilton College, I'd like to thank Jeannie and Jimmy
Oh.
Cheatham for being here today.
And,
And,
we
uh,
sure appreciate it.
I appreciate your, we've had a balance in this conversation too. Kind of the way up here stuff to think about and kind of that basic blues stuff to think
Yeah.
about
Well,
too.
Why not?
That's
All
it.
Well, thanks for your time.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.